$65 million. That's what it cost to build Veterans Stadium in South Philadelphia in 1971. They called it the Vet. For 33 years, it was the most feared stadium in American sports, not because of what happened on the field, but because of what happened in the stands. The place that put a courtroom in its basement. The place where fans threw D-cell batteries at players. The place where a man fired a flare gun during a Monday night football game. And yet, it was also the place where Philadelphia finally won, where the Phillies broke a 97-year championship drought, where the Eagles sent their city to the Super Bowl for the first time. The Vet was a dump. The Vet was a fortress, and the field they played on may have quietly been killing the men who played there. This is not just a story about a stadium. This is a story about what a city looks like when it loves something and hates it at the same time. By the early 1960s, Philadelphia's sporting life was in jeopardy. Connie Mack Stadium, built in 1909 as Shibe Park, was literally falling apart. The surrounding neighborhood was declining, and the venue itself was obsolete. The Athletics had already packed up and left for Kansas City in 1954, leaving a deep scar and a constant fear that the city would lose its remaining teams. The Eagles had already abandoned the crumbling park in 1958, moving permanently to Franklin Field. When Phillies owner Bob Carpenter threatened to relocate the franchise to New Jersey, city leaders scrambled. City Council President Paul Dortona pushed through a site in South Philadelphia, defeating rival proposals in Camden, Torresdale, West Philadelphia, and Montgomery County. To fund the project, voters approved a $25 million bond in 1964, followed by another $13 million bond in 1967 as construction expenses surged. Ground broke on October 2, 1967. But the build was plagued by labor strikes, severe weather, and design changes that delayed the planned 1970 opening. A construction scandal unraveled when investigators discovered contractors had substituted weaker materials than specified, a fraud prosecuted by District Attorney Arlen Specter that later collapsed on appeal. On April 10, 1971, the stadium finally opened. The Phillies beat the Montreal Expos 4-1 before 55,352 fans. Harry Kalas emceed the opening day ceremony, welcoming fans to a new era. Yet beneath the celebration, the very bones of the stadium were already marked by political compromise, rising debt, and compromised materials. The true cost of the city's design compromises lay just beneath the players' feet. To allow quick transitions between baseball and football, engineers installed AstroTurf directly over a raw, concrete base. The resulting surface possessed virtually no shock absorption. For 30 years, players compared falling on the Vet's turf to hitting the street. The NFL Players Association consistently rated it the worst field in the entire league, a notorious workplace hazard where the seams between turf panels frequently separated. In October 1993, the danger turned catastrophic. Chicago Bears receiver Wendell Davis ran a routine route, planted his cleats, and caught a seam. The turf refused to give. On a single play, both of Davis's patellar tendons ruptured, tearing his kneecaps up into his thighs and ending his career. 3 years later, in 1996, Eagles quarterback Rodney Peete suffered a similar fate, tearing his patellar tendon when his foot became trapped in the rigid surface. In 1999, Dallas Cowboys playmaker Michael Irvin caught a pass and went headfirst into the turf, suffering a career-ending cervical spinal cord injury. The field's reputation spread throughout professional sports, prompting multiple active players to quietly request that their agents block any potential trades to Philadelphia. The crisis peaked in September 2001 before a scheduled preseason matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. During warm-ups, players from both teams discovered uneven cutouts and loose, sliding sections of turf where the seams had failed to secure to the concrete. Ravens head coach Brian Billick declared the field completely unsafe. Refusing to risk his team's safety, Billick pulled his players off the field, forcing the NFL to cancel the game just hours before kickoff. It was a historic embarrassment for Philadelphia, confirming to a national audience that the city's premier sports venue had become a physical threat to the people who played on it. The danger of the artificial field extended far past broken bones and shredded knee ligaments. For some who played on it, the consequences may have been fatal. Over the years, 6 former Phillies who spent seasons running on that hard green carpet died from glioblastoma, an aggressive and rare form of brain cancer. Tug McGraw, Darren Daulton, John Vukovich, Johnny Oates, Ken Brett, David West. The sheer concentration of this specific, lethal diagnosis among former teammates began to look less like a tragic coincidence and more like an occupational hazard. The rate of glioblastoma among these players was roughly 3 times the baseline rate for adult males. In 2023, reporters Emily Gambacorta and Barbara Laker of the Philadelphia Inquirer sought to investigate if the field itself was hiding an invisible poison. They tracked down and purchased sealed, original souvenir turf samples that had been sold or given to fans in 1982. These relics were still sealed in bags labeled Official Turf of Champions. The reporters sent these pieces of the vet's turf to 2 independent testing laboratories, Eurofins Scientific in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and the Environmental Chemistry Lab at the University of Notre Dame. The results were alarming. The labs identified 16 different per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, widely known as PFAS or forever chemicals. These highly toxic compounds were used to manufacture synthetic fibers and carpet backings. PFAS are known for their extreme persistence, meaning they do not easily break down in the human body or the environment. Medical research has associated chronic PFAS exposure with multiple health issues, including liver damage, thyroid disease, immune suppression, and various cancers, including brain tumors. To date, no legal or medical causal link has been officially established between the stadium's playing surface and the glioblastoma deaths of those 6 players. Proving that direct exposure on a baseball field caused a specific brain tumor decades later remains a scientific challenge. But the anxiety reaches far past the stadium gates. For decades, those same green souvenir turf squares sat on bookshelves, in basements, and on nightstands in thousands of homes across Philadelphia, a piece of civic pride quietly harboring chemicals that never fade away. Before 1980, the Philadelphia Phillies had endured 67 years without a World Series championship, a multi-generational drought that weighed heavily on the city. But that summer, the concrete giant at Broad and Pattison became the stage for a legendary run that would forever alter the franchise's history. Mike Schmidt powered the offense, hitting 48 home runs during his National League MVP campaign. On the mound, Steve Carlton dominated hitters to post a 24-9 record, securing his 3rd Cy Young Award. In the bullpen, Tug McGraw anchored the relief staff with infectious, chaotic energy. It all came down to Game 6 on October 21, 1980. At exactly 11:39 p.m., McGraw stood on the mound, facing Kansas City's Willie Wilson. McGraw fired a fastball, Wilson swung and missed, and the vet erupted into a state of absolute catharsis. To prevent fans from storming the artificial turf, mounted police with German shepherds quickly circled the playing field, but nothing could contain the joy on the diamond. Mike Schmidt sprinted from third base and leaped into Tug McGraw's arms, creating an iconic embrace that became the defining image of 20th century Philadelphia sports. At the massive victory parade that followed, Schmidt looked out at the sea of fans and delivered a line that cemented the bond between the city and its champions. "Take this world championship and savor it. You all deserve it." For a city that had waited so long, the harsh, gray stadium was transformed into a sacred place of redemption. On January 11, 1981, the concrete oval on Pattison Avenue braced for another historic clash. The Eagles hosted the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship, using every psychological advantage available. By electing to wear their white jerseys at home, the Eagles forced Dallas into their supposedly unlucky blue uniforms. Before a record crowd of 70,696 fans, the strategy paid off in a physical 20-7 victory. To prevent a repeat of the Phillies' celebration, a security ring of police horses and guard dogs lined the perimeter. But the crowd's raw energy could not be contained. Fans surged past the barricade, storming the hard green turf to celebrate the franchise's first-ever Super Bowl appearance. Though the season ended with a 27-10 loss to the Oakland Raiders in Super Bowl 15, the Vet had delivered two legendary championship moments in less than 90 days. The stadium was no longer just a municipal building, it was a modern coliseum of civic triumph. The raw energy of 70,000 screaming fans condensed at the very top of the concrete bowl, in the highest and cheapest seats of the stadium, the 700 level. This section became the most notorious upper deck in American sports, defined by hostile taunting, brawling, public urination, and an air of unpredictable strangeness. Visiting fans were routinely removed by security for their own safety, and those who remained faced outright assault. The hostility spared no one. Eagles head coach Dick Vermeil once became so unhinged by a heckler that he tried to climb into the stands, restrained only by the grip of legendary linebacker Chuck Bednarik. By the late 1980s, the chaos turned systemic. During a snowy December game against the Dallas Cowboys in 1989, fans pelted Dallas players and coaches with ice-packed snowballs, prompting a two-game beer ban. In November 1997, during a 24-12 Monday Night Football loss to San Francisco, more than 60 fights broke out and a live flare gun was fired across the playing field. The following year, fans targeted baseball outfielder J.D. Drew for declining to sign with the Phillies, hurling heavy D-cell batteries directly at him. The 700 level had escalated into a severe public order crisis. Following the 1997 flare gun incident, city officials acknowledged that standard game day security had completely failed. In response, Councilman Jim Kenney and Judge Seamus McCaffrey established a functioning municipal courtroom directly in the stadium basement. Outfitted with blue carpet and matching blue curtains, this makeshift legal chamber allowed police to bring arrested fans before the judge immediately after their ejection from the stands. McCaffrey presided over the rapid-fire hearings, handing down community service or instant fines ranging from $150 to $300. Eagles Court operated from November 1997 through January 2003, processing hundreds of unruly spectators right below the cheering crowds. It remains an arrangement completely unprecedented in American sports history, a bizarre marriage of criminal justice and professional athletics born of desperation. By the mid-1990s, the stadium was physically unraveling. Feral cats were routinely released into the concourses just to manage a runaway rat infestation. When Coach John Gruden asked about the roaming felines, stadium staff told him bluntly, they were there to kill the rats. Up on the 700 level, the plumbing failed entirely. Restrooms were so catastrophically inadequate that male fans routinely used sinks and ripped out paper towel dispensers as urinals. Across the concrete bowl, water dripped from cracked ceilings, seats sat broken, and concrete chipped away. When Baltimore's Camden Yards opened in 1992, it immediately exposed the Vet as an obsolete relic. The structural danger became undeniable in 1998 during the Army-Navy game when a support railing collapsed, sending West Point cadets plunging to the field. By then, both the Eagles and Phillies were actively lobbying to escape. The Vet's final year transformed the decaying concrete bowl into a site of emotional ritual. On January 19, 2003, the Eagles played their final game here, a 27-10 playoff defeat to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before moving to Lincoln Financial Field. 8 months later, on September 28, 58,554 fans filled the stands for the Phillies' finale, a 5-2 loss to Atlanta. After the final out, a closing ceremony brought 120 Phillies legends onto the field. Steve Carlton mimed a strikeout. Mike Schmidt took one final swing and trotted the bases. Then, Tug McGraw, battling the brain cancer that would take his life that winter, stood on the mound to mime his famous championship pitch. Beside him was former manager Paul Owens, also making his last public appearance before passing away months later. Broadcaster Harry Cullis signed off one last time. It's on a long drive. It's out of here. At 7 a.m. on March 21, 2004, Greg Luzinski and the Philly Fanatic pushed down a ceremonial plunger. Clockwise around the massive structure, 3,000 pounds of explosives detonated in sequence. It took just 62 seconds for Veterans Stadium to collapse into a mountain of dust. Through the quiet morning air, an onlooker played taps on a silver trumpet. Today, the site is a parking lot. The Phillies painted the old field outline directly onto the asphalt, placing granite markers where home plate, the mound, and the bases once sat. But the vet story did not end with the dust. The unresolved brain cancer pattern remains an open wound, and thousands of green souvenir turf squares still sit on bookshelves in homes across Philadelphia. A city loved this place fiercely, even as it harbored poisons that refused to fade away. Today, a parking lot covers the vet's footprint, but its true cost is still being paid. For the players who battled on that toxic concrete turf, the scars aren't history. They are active fights for survival. We built a coliseum out of fierce civic pride, realizing too late the danger it hid. It was brutal, beloved, and entirely unforgettable. Share your memories of the vet below.